Hello and welcome to the 10th and final round of Battle of the Decades, the show where I, Chuchu of Chuchu is a Ranker, recap my Album of the Year series, correct any glaring mistakes I made via my Album of the Year choices, and also indulge in a totally nonsense yet hopefully fun tournament to find out what was the best decade in music. So let's have a look at our Albums of the Year roster. From 1969 we have Abbey Road by the Beatles. From 1979 we have Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division. From 1989 we have Disintegration by The Cure. From 1999 we have Summer Teeth by Wilco. From 2009 we have Actor by St. Vincent. And from 2019 we have Crushing by Julia Jacklin. And as for corrections, well, there are just two to dig into this time. First up is 1999. Summer Teeth by Wilco is a fine folk-tinged rock record, but I'm not sure how that ended up as my Album of the Year, to be honest. Certainly not over records like What Are You Going to Do With Your Life by Echo and the Bunnymen. However, the record that is officially going to take Wilco's spot is 13 by Blur, which is an LP I simply hadn't heard yet when I made my 1999 Album of the Year list. When I finally did hear it, it blew me away. The next up for the chopping block is 2009. Actor by St. Vincent is a superb art rock album and definitely one of St. Vincent's best works, but it really shouldn't have beaten the record that came in second place on the 2009 list, which is These Four Walls by We Were Promised Jetpacks, which is easily the album that I have played the most and have loved the most from that year, and is still one I come back to regularly. And with those corrections done and dusted, I'm now fully satisfied with these selections. So, now the battlefield has been prepared, let's be complete rankers and rank into the very fabric of time itself. This is Battle of the Decades, Round 10. Coming in last place and netting the 2000s 1 point, we have These Four Walls by the Scottish indie band We Were Promised Jetpacks, which was their debut LP from 2009. And We Were Promised Jetpacks mix up elements of indie guitar pop and art rock into a punky yet miserable stew. Their sound is kind of like an amalgamation of Biffy Clyro, Frightened Rabbit and Block Party. And if that sounds like a recipe for prototypical to a penny indie rock, well yeah, kind of is, but at least We Were Promised Jetpacks do it very well. Well enough in fact that I either like or love every album they've released thus far. And here we find the band at their least nuanced but most delightfully youthful, putting together a collection of starkly angular and energetic tunes that, despite the roar of heavy set guitar distortion, never lose that emotional kernel of sadness at their core. Highlights on an incredibly consistent indie banger that sounds like a minor classic these days includes a thunderously building opener, It's Thunder and It's Lightning, which seems to be about the horrors of domestic abuse and the helplessness to do anything about it. As singer Adam Thompson concludes, I have to say goodnight. I'm leaving before you're punching out my lights. The stuttering guitars and wintry thrum of Roll Up Your Sleeves is great, and the way it unexpectedly calms down at the climax into an atmospheric outro is very nice indeed. Conductor meanwhile is a dreamily textured ballad that puts the band's sense of lilting emotion on display. This Is My House, This Is My Home is awesome. Its build up from sorrow-tinged slow jam into squalling rock out is actually one of my favourite throw yourself around the living room moments of the past 15 years or so. All the 8 minutes of Keeping Warm manage to keep your interest warm with their atmosphere building prowess, blistering instrumental blast of guitar and tender lyrics. But yeah, you can't really go wrong with any of these tracks, from the rolling drums and whiplash pace of Short Bursts, to the catchily robust Ships with Holes Will Sink, to the obvious mainstream hit appeal of the band's most famous song, Quiet Little Voices. It's all very entertaining, glamorous indie rock and roll fun that I personally never get tired of. 5 stars! Next up, and netting the 2010s 2 points, we have Crushing by Julia Jacklin from 2019, which was the Australian singer-songwriter's second LP. And this album saw Jacklin gain a lot of indie street cred as it took in a brace of good reviews and ended up on many end of the year lists for 2019. And with good reason, as here we have a jangle pop / singer-songwriter hybrid of an LP that hangs heavy with the type of intense sorrow that can only be caused by a particularly painful breakup. Indeed, this is made very apparent from the lyrics, which almost entirely revolve around the pain of romantic loss and the tiring effort it takes to rebound from it. And this, crushing mood is enhanced by a clutch of weeping ballads and slow jams that tease every iota of emotion out of Julia's stricken words. That said, there are a few peppier indie tracks such as Head Alone, Pressure to Party and You Were Right, which ramp up the pace and energy of things while still keeping the lyrical themes of the record intact. Highlights on an emotional tour de force includes the steadily paced opener Body, which sees Julia sigh, "I remember the early days when you took my camera and turned to me, 23, naked on your bed, looking straight at you. Do you still have that photograph? Would you use it to hurt me?" The languorous ballad Don't Know How to Keep Loving You has a nice oaken tone to its guitar work, and some gently weeping solos that heighten the track's uncertain drama. When the Family Flies In is a startlingly effective piano ballad that sounds like it's been played through a veil of tears. The line where she sings, "The last thing I ever sent to you was an irrelevant music video, and I'll always wonder if you ever watched it." Man, it just hits like a ton of bricks. It's just so acutely painful. Turn Me Down is a kind of loge tune that is brought to life by a stunning vocal section that starts low but gradually gathers power until Julia is absolutely roaring right from the pit of her stomach. I mean, it's awesome. While the closer, Comfort, is a simple finger-strummed acoustic tune that sees her lamenting on the pain her ex must be feeling, collapsing into the chorus, "I can't be the one to hold him when I was the one that left." So yeah, this record is a heartbreaking masterpiece that just leaves you in tatters, and it's always wonderful when an album can dig its emotional claws in that hard. Yeah, this LP is fantastic. 5 stars. Next up, netting the 1960s 3 points, we have Abbey Road by the Beatles from 1969, which was the Fab Four's 11th LP and the last one the band recorded together, despite being released before their final album release of Let It Be. And yeah, I know what you're saying, having Abbey Road at anything other than number 1 is sacrilegious. It's an all-time masterpiece of an album. And yes, I agree, it is an all-time masterpiece. But take a look around, this is Battle of the Decades, there's quite a few all-timers on this particular list. And you also have to understand that I'm a kid of the 1990s. Most of my nostalgia goes towards 90s Britpop and the jangle pop and alt rock of the 1980s. I don't have a particularly deep connection with the Beatles. That said, I still really like the band and appreciate their legacy and unmatched contribution to the history of music. But all that historical stuff aside, and Abbey Road still just absolutely slaps as a simple album of amazing music. And this album is kind of one of two halves. On the first side you get a bunch of individual tunes that ply a good trade in catchy pop and sweeping ballads. While side 2 is a bit more progressive, featuring some interconnected ideas as well as a suite of songs that all seamlessly segue into one another. And it's all pretty damn fantastic, with the band's technical playing ability very clearly hitting its peak. In fact, the only incremental complaint I have for the record would be that the section of the closing suite that comprises Me, Mr. Mustard and Polythene Pam is a bit forgettable. On the flip side though, those tracks are very short, so who really cares? Highlights on an ironclad classic includes the opening Come Together, which is one of the band's most stylish songs, with its iconic slithering bass line giving the track a swaggering cool. Despite causing a rift between the members of the Beatles, Maxwell's Silver Hammer is lots of fun with its vaudevillian flourish and amusingly murderous lyrics. Octopus Garden continues a tradition of giving Ringo a twee nursery rhyme style song to sing on each album, but it's wonderfully catchy and I just love the arpeggiated guitar work on the track. Countering that tweeness is I Want You, She's So Heavy, which is a gurning epic that features a badass and dramatic guitar figure. It's one of the darkest sounding tracks that the Beatles ever put to tape, it's awesome. Here Comes the Sun meanwhile is a sugary rush of bright guitar riffs and iconic melodies that add up to an immediately enjoyable summery treat. while the closing epic that includes Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight and The End is a perfect proggy finale that is anthemic in all the right ways and guaranteed to make you want to instantly sing along. So yeah, I could continue and name drop other great tracks such as Something, You Never Giving Me Your Money, and She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, but I don't really need to, do I? Even your mum's dog knows exactly how Abbey Road sounds and why it's just so damn good. 5 stars. Next up, netting the 1990s 4 points, we have 13 by Blur from 1999, which was the legendary Britpop's 6th LP and last of their original run to feature guitarist Graham Coxon, who departed the band during sessions for the next record, Think Tank, due to growing tensions. But those tensions definitely served the band well here on 13, which is, in my opinion, by far the band's best album. Now that's not to throw shade at the rest of the band's discography, Blur have many good albums, it's just that this one for me is simply on another level. And here Blur continue to evolve on from the wiry self-titled LP that experimented with garage and art rock. Except here on 13, they leap fully down the experimental rabbit hole, offering up a diverse set of songs that play around a lot with effects washes, sonic textures and ambient elements, all the while skewing in a much darker and ultimately more cathartic direction. It's also the band's longest LP, unrepentantly sailing past the hour mark. Now usually I complain about that, but on this rare occasion the length actually helps the record, giving the songs more space to breathe and making the overall ride feel more epic and substantial. As for highlights, it's not really that kind of album. This is a record where you just have to let go and float through the entire package, letting the tide undulate you through its ever-changing sonic vistas. But still, there are some obligatory hits. The 7-minute opener, Tender, is great with its deep South Cajun flavour and grandiose gospel elements. The Graham Coxon-fronted Coffee and TV is a shimmering slice of catchy jangle pop, while No Distance Left to Run is a raw and devastatingly sad stripped-back ballad that sees Damon Albarn breaking down over the end of his relationship with Elastica's Justine Frischmann. But for me, it's actually the more obtuse, experimental and atmospheric stuff that goes truly stratospheric. Tracks like 1992, Battle and Caramel are really addictive with their expertly crafted soundscapes whisking you away to sadder, distant shores. While the likes of the boisterous Swamp Song, which sees Albarn shrieking about putting naughty substances into his veins, and the epic Trim Trap use spiky grunge guitars to their advantage without ever falling into that particular genre trap. But yeah, to be honest, this record is just too dense and complex to really talk about in detail, unless you literally want to be here for hours. It's just something you have to go and experience for yourself, and experience it you definitely should, as it's simply one of the greatest art rock records ever put to tape. It is amazing. 5 stars. Next up, and netting the 1970s 5 points, we have Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division from 1979, which was the legendary post-punk icon's debut LP. And what we have here is almost unarguably the most famous post-punk album ever recorded, and, rather bizarrely, one of the biggest t-shirt movers in the history of rock. I mean, seriously, I wonder what percentage of people wearing Joy Division shirts have actually ever listened to Unknown Pleasures. The mind boggles. But on this, under the production thumb of Martin Hannett, the band craft a stark, wiry and angular post-punk masterpiece that has a mechanised industrial overtone to it. The overall atmosphere of the record is heightened by the threadbare skill of the musicians in the band. They don't sound that technically competent, to be honest. It's almost like they're winging it through with some guitar snarl and lots of bravado, but somehow that totally fits the tone of the piece. And then you have the frontman Ian Curtis, whose monotone vocal style, poetic lyrics and suicidal tendencies galvanised an entire generation of sad young men. And the songs themselves are all great, alternating between spacious, minimalistic dirges such as Candidate, Insight, and I Remember Nothing, which wallow in their darkened, empty crypts of marbled sorrow, and searing blasts of punky ferocity such as the buzzing interzone or the catchily awesome Shadow Play, with its booming chorus of "To the center of the city at night, waiting for you." Other high spots include the pulsing She's Lost Control, with its iconic bassline and percussion that incorporates the sound of spray cans into the mix. The dark gothic slow jam of Day of the Lords, which sounds like it gave every member of Interpol simultaneous wet dreams. And the awesome New Dawn Fades with its fantastic lyrical poetry and unforgettable guitar riffage. So yeah, Unknown Pleasures has endured over the years and has cemented itself as an untouchable classic and a cornerstone of post-punk and gothic rock for a very good reason. And that reason is it's simply flawless. Now, where the hell did I put that damn t-shirt? 5 stars. Coming in first place and netting the 1980s a full 6 points, we have Disintegration by The Cure from 1989, which was the band's 8th and, in my opinion, best LP. And here we find the band turning away from the more pop-orientated direction of their last few albums, A Head on the Door and Kiss Me Kiss Me Kiss Me, and back to the more gothic stylings of their earlier records. But it's not repetition the band are going for here, as Disintegration is a very different beast to the likes of Pornography, despite lurking in the same darkened genre. On this, The Cure put a lot of effort into the sonic texturing of the tunes, much more so than ever before, adding lots of embellished layers as well as far more in the way of synths and keys. This gives the songs a deep doloriferous richness of sound that's actually quite unique. It's kind of hard to explain, but the sound of the album is just so distinctive. There's no other record that sounds quite like Disintegration does. It's a very specific kind of sound. And the band matched this sonic richness with an epic sense of scope and ambition. A lot of these compositions are lengthy leviathans that sprawl out past the 7-minute mark, which gives them ample space to breathe and summon up luxurious atmospheres. And speaking of length, it needs to be noted that the album is definitely a long one, clocking in at 1 hour and 12 minutes. Now in the past I've complained about that aspect of Disintegration and have felt that it was the record's main drawback, but I have to say that I've kind of come around on that lately. Sure, it is a very long LP, but much like the Blur record I covered earlier, Disintegration earns its runtime and doesn't have any weak songs on it. Highlights on arguably my favourite album of the 1980s includes the opening Plane song, which is just phenomenal, sending these gigantic cathartic swells of synths at you straight from the off. Pictures of You is as epic a stadium rock ballad as you could ever conceive, its sweeping light as aloft composition reaching its peak as Robert Smith sobs, "If only I'd thought of the right words, I could have held on to your heart." Love Song is a short, sharp pop tune dominated by its unironically romantic lyrics and uniquely distinctive keyboard tones. Lullaby turns up the theatricality to 11 with its fun, horror-themed lyrics and memorably whispered vocals. While Fascination Street is badass, taking the cool rhythmic energy of How Soon Is Now by the Smiths and merging it with a riff pilfered from Shine On You Crazy Diamond by Pink Floyd before topping it all off with a glowering, drug-addled lyric, is one of The Cure's most strident moments. But yeah, you just can't really put a toe wrong here, from the swirling gothic soundscapes of Close Down, Prayers for Rain and the 9-minute epic dirge The Same Deep Water As You, to the jumbled energetic thump of the title track Disintegration, to the melancholic come down of the closing Untitled. It's just all really great stuff from a great band at the absolute apex of their career. 5 stars. So, stop praying for Jesus to resurrect himself and come give you a handjob, and turn your attention one last time to the scoreboard. And it's official, the 1980s have done it, squeaking past the 1990s in the final round to win it all with 45 points. The 1990s slid down to second with 43 points. The 1970s also narrowly beat the 1960s to third place with 36 points. The 1960s end up in fourth with 35 points. The 2000s are in fifth with 27 points, and lagging behind in last is the 2010s with 23 points. And there you have it. The winner of Battle of the Decades is the 1980s. What a bunch of nonsense this whole thing was. But I did have fun, and I hope you did too. Of course, I know you'd rank these albums differently, so why not sound off in the comments and tell me all about it. Of course, I fully invite you to make your own version of this tournament with your own personal albums of the year and post that in the comments too. Feel free to check out this episode's Spotify playlist, which features a track from every one of my albums of the year from 1960 to the current day. That thing is an absolute beast. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Make sure to take care of yourself, but most importantly, just keep on ranking.